And welcome back to the Countdown. I'm your Countdown host, MJ Book, back for another episode here in the world of Countdown. Uh, Great to have you listening in, or if you're watching on YouTube. Um, Tried to record a little earlier and had some technical difficulties after some working on it. Finally got everything to work here at the 123 Studios, so I'm back here and ready to give you a new episode. Uh, just recently, as far as when I'm recording this, did an episode of 3GW where we reviewed the most recent NXT Takeover in Your House pay-per-view. Me, the Ambassador Rob, and of course, the real Big E. This was my first live current product NXT pay-per-view. So you want to know what me and the guys thought? Please listen in or watch 3GW and find out what we thought of the current, most recent pay per view. As far as this show goes, well, if you've been watching or listening, you know I've been going through the 80s. We're back. We're trying to finish through this series of the 80s that was fan suggested that I go through the 80s of my favorite movies, and we're in 1984. So we're nearing on. And what's interesting about this is, as far as the next few lists go, some big movies came out in the early 80s. There were some big movies that came out that you all know and that you have been probably waiting for to come up, which is why I did it in this order. Instead of starting it at the very beginning of the 80s, I decided to end it with the beginning of the 80s because there was some seriously huge movies that happened at that time frame. So it just made more sense. Plus, it kind of started with the guy wanting me to do 1989 because of Batman. So it just made the most sense to do it this way. And I could be running down some honorable mentions, but that could hint you to what is going to be on this countdown. So I'll do that after we've done our 10. Makes it a little more suspenseful. Don't you agree? All right. Well, let's get started with the countdown with number 10. Number 10 was a movie I did not think I was going to like back in the day. I thought it kind of looked stupid, but for some reason, I decided to give it a try and watched it. And I was pleasantly surprised how much I ended up liking the movie back then. It impacted a lot of parts of my life. I remember back in the day, Hardee's had a deal where you got certain meals and you would get a gift. They still do these in stores today, but for this, it was tied to this movie in which they would release. I'm about to age myself. They would give you records. There was I think it was a 5-part series, and you had to come back and get each one. And I did have all 5, and I wish I still had them. I wonder if they'd be worth anything, but it'd be just kind of funny to listen to them again. But this movie was directed by Joe Dante and written by Chris Columbus, stars Zach Galligan, Proby Cates, Hoyt Ayton, Key Luke, Don Steele, Corey Feldman was in this movie as well. Dick Miller. It was, you may not know the name, but he's been in so many movies. You'd know the face. You'd know the face easily. And it is, well, it also stars a very popular little furry creature that is called a mogwai named Gizmo. Does that help you? That's right. Gremlins. As I said, I did not think that I was going to like Gremlins. I just didn't think I was going to like it, but it caught me by surprise. And I remember as a kid, I had a stuffed Gizmo that if you squeezed, he would say, Gizmo, Mogwai. Uh, Now, I'm about to reveal a little bit about myself here, but when this, during this year, age-wise, here comes my math again. I was 5. Wait, let me see this. 84. Okay. Okay, 5 to 6. So I had a stuffed Mogwai, stuffed Gizmo that was my sleep buddy, and that's what I slept. I would sleep with this Mogwai in my arms. Yes, cute. I know, and I'm sure some of you are laughing, but we all had that kind of. We had something as a kid. We all had that. For me, it was my Mogwai. And if you're familiar with the movie, it's about a young man who receives a gift from his father who went into this ancient little store and they just happen to have a little mogwai there. No rules, no laws about having a caged animal, especially one that nobody had ever heard of. No rules about that. Anyway, father brings it home and he's given some rules. Don't feed it after midnight. Don't get it wet. Just common rules that accompany any living creature. Anyway, one night the young man gives the mogwai some chicken, and these little fur balls pop up, and they produce smaller mogwais. But these are different. They are separate from Gizmo. They're just different. And eventually they somewhat mutate because they become gremlins. And the gremlins are bigger, meaner, and nastier. And they just invade this town, this small little town, and its population is just trying to survive. Now, it's a PG movie, and the thing is, it was marketed to kids. But if you watch it, it really shouldn't have been marketed to kids. There's some potentially scary moments for a kid, some violent moments for a kid. Now, it never scared me, but I remember there were kids around my age that were scared of this movie, that they had nightmares, that they were afraid that gremlins were under their bed. I mean, I remember one of my best friends was terrified that there were gremlins. And he would look at my Mogwai gizmo thing and he'd be like, I don't know how you can have that. He was scared to death. That movie just scared the crap out of him. Now, as a adult, as he grew up, I'm pretty sure he was ashamed of that. But it happens. We all have those stupid little fears. But this movie would eventually get a sequel, Gremlins 2, The New Batch, which is okay. It's not a terrible movie, but it doesn't hold as well as the original, which happens a lot. And of course, there's talks that they're going to do a sequel, a third movie, or a reboot. So who knows? I mean, would I watch it? It would depend on the trailer, but I'd probably be curious. I would be curious to see what they would do with it, to see if they would, maybe bring anybody back from the original. It would be interesting. I mean, we saw recently a commercial, I think it was in the Super Bowl, involving the Gremlins. So, I mean, this thing is still going strong. Everybody remembers the Gremlins, and they're long lasting. So, number 10, Gremlins. Number 9. Number 9, well, number 9's special to me in a way because I myself have been called a lot of things in this world. I've been called a dork. You probably already know where this is going just because I said that. I've been called a lot of things. But hey, I also have been called a nerd. Does that help? It should. This 1984 movie was, here we go, with more bad names for me. Jeff Canoe, it's was the director. It's writers. Tim Metcalf, Steve Zacharias, Miguel Flores stars Robert Carradine, Anthony Edwards, Timothy Busfield, Larry B. Scott, Julie Morgan, Brian Takuchi, Curtis Armstrong, Timothy Busfield, Tim McGinley, Donald Gibb, just so many people. Matt Slanginger, John Goodman was in this movie. Uh, just a whole bunch of people. It is, of course, the movie that describes me to a T. Revenge of the Nerds. Revenge of the Nerds. Come on. Some of you may not remember that song, but yes, Revenge of the Nerds. I mean, I was a nerd and I was proud of it. And this was kind of like a calling out party, if you could say, for nerds. Now, nerds back then were picked on badly, badly picked on. And not to say that nerds don't get picked on now, but it it just felt different because I was one of those nerds back then. A nerd now, the people that people were calling nerds back then are like billionaires now. So, and the term nerd in a way has actually kind of changed. It's actually a cool term. People call themselves nerds now. Back then, it was kind of an insult to be called a nerd. Now, people call themselves nerd. I call myself a black nerd, a nerd. I mean, it's a weird term, but it's a black nerd. So being a nerd was kind of not the coolest thing back then, but it was who you are, and it was just the story of these college kids who just happen to be nerds, and they band together and they joined this fraternity, Lambda Lambda Lambda, which it's funny, traditionally it was a black fraternity, and they let in all these nerds. It was kind of and it's stereotypical black too, by the way. There's a lot of stereotypes in this movie. But it's 80s. Nobody looked at it and thought it was mean. I mean, I don't think it's mean to this day, but a movie like that probably wouldn't happen today because people would get offended because we live in this please be nice to me kind of era, whatever. But it happens at a college, Adams College, and these nerds are and these outcasts are being bullied by the popular kids in the school, which happens to be the football team. But some of the teachers get involved in it. Uh, Players' girlfriend, just everybody is picking on them, and it's just them trying to fight back. And for me, it was just it's like, wow, these guys are able to fight back. And it kind of, in a way, taught me, because there was a little bit of bullying that was starting to happen. It was starting. But this movie kind of helped me say, no, no, I'm not going to tolerate this. And although I didn't go as far as the nerds did in this movie, as Lambda 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 did, I did stand up for myself, and that's what this movie really kind of put it to me, that I could stand up for myself. And of course, look at just who, you got Anthony Edwards, who kind of became a big star on a little show maybe you heard of called ER. But this holds a real good special place for me because it kind of was one of those things that helped me stand up for myself a little bit. This has had a whole lot of sequels. I am not going to run down all of them. The first few were theatrical, and then after that, it became just straight to TV or DVD type of sequels. At its height, I think there was like 5 movies, I believe, and just a few years ago they did some updated version of it. But it also spawned off a reality show, believe it or not, that was hosted by Curtis Armstrong, who was Booger. And that, my name is Booker. As a kid, I was called Booger. Part of it was because of this movie. They took the K out of my name and put a G in there. So, even to this day, somebody will still fly out and say Booger. And they'll think they're being clever. They're not. But still, this was a fun movie, entertaining. Love Revenge of the Nerds. Again, like in everything, hear about remakes, hear about reboots. This is one of those I don't want to see. There's just no way, no reason for me to see it because the term nerd just doesn't mean the same now to me. Now it's a badge of honor almost. Like I said, people call themselves nerds. So I just don't think that would work now, not with the term nerd, at least not to me. But do you want to see it? Would you see it? Let me know if you would see it. But number 9, Revenge of the Nerds. Number 8. Number 8 is, well, definitely not a comedy like we just talked about with Revenge of the Nerds. This definitely is more action, fantasy, and it stars a name that is just all over this show. A guy whose name is just constantly mentioned. It seems like almost I can't go an episode without his name popping up. Although I have gone episodes clearly with his name not being uttered. But this is, like I said, it's fantasy. Definitely has its share of violence. This is, but who cares? It was enjoyable. It's directed by Richard Fleischer, written by Robert E. Howard, who was helped create the character. It's also, the story was by Roy Thomas. Stars Arnold Schwarzenegger, Grace Jones, Wilt Chamberlain, Olivia Badabu. I probably said that name horribly wrong. Mako, Sarah Douglas, Tracy Walter. It is Conan the Destroyer. Now, Conan the Destroyer, I know that there are people who look to Conan the Barbarian as the better of the two. And I understand that. I'm kind of in the minority of this, and I've mentioned this before in a previous countdown. I prefer Conan the Destroyer. I have the DVD set where it's both movies, Conan, both Arnold ones. I have to say that now because they made the Jason Momoa one, and God, that sucked. But I bought it saying, yes, finally, I have Conan the Destroyer, and yeah, it's got Barbarian too. That's kind of how I felt. And I went home that night and watched Conan the Destroyer. And then a few days later, I watched Conan the Barbarian. Now, again, I like Conan the Barbarian. I do. I really do like that one. I just prefer Conan the Destroyer. I don't know why. I think Conan the Barbarian has, as far as a villain, it has a better villain played by, James Earl Jones. There's just something about Conan the Destroyer that just tied to me a little more. I do not know why, but it's the further adventures of Conan in this fantasy world as he leads this ragtag group on a quest with the princess, and along the way they meet all manner of creatures and wizards and of course he reunites with Mako, who was in the first movie. You may remember him as the wizard that was in that movie, Akiro. He of course has Tracy Walter's character, Malik, who's a thief. They meet Zula, played by Grace Jones, who's this warrior princess. Of course, I said Princess. You guys, Princess Gina, played by Olivia, who's being guarded by Wilt Chamberlain's character, Bombata. And they're just on this quest, this princess's quest. Now, the problem is at the end of it, she's supposed to be killed. And a lot of things happen at the end. Don't want to spoil it all for you, but there's a couple of really good fight scenes. One of my favorites is, of course, with Conan and Bombata. It's a long, drawn-out fight, but damn, I love that fight. It's an awesome fight. I wish they would have made another Conan with Arnold back then, because there's rumors that they're going to do another Conan now with him. Obviously, I'll see it, but I wish they would have done one more back then. And of course, after this, we would get that more recently, the Jason Momoa movie, which is so stupid. It's just so stupid. There was a Conan live action TV show, which was bad. It was just bad. There was a Conan cartoon show that I don't understand how it existed. How do you take this character who is he has talked about raping and pillaging, and he's slicing people in half, and you put this and you put it into a cartoon. Sometimes I just don't understand what they were thinking back then, but whatever, they did it. They had a cartoon. I remember having the action figure. It was about that tall. It was freakishly big, but I think I still have it in a bag somewhere, as a matter of fact. But Conan, love the Conan the Destroyer. I would love to have that sword. That sword is awesome because I have a couple of swords. I have a blade sword, and I have a dragon sword from Highlander. Uh, I would love to have the Conan sword. That'd be freaking cool. But Conan for Rob. Hey, there you go. Conan. I got Arnold on here. So number 8 is Conan the Destroyer. Enjoyable movie, like I said. It's just to me slightly better, maybe not even slightly better. To me, it's just head and shoulders. And I love Conan the Barbarian, but to me, Conan the Destroyer just happens to be better. Number 8. Number 7. I have a lot of loves. I have a lot of loves, and video gaming is one. Batman is one. Wrestling is another one, but another one of them is baseball. To me, baseball is the greatest sport ever. To me, it's just not close. Some of you may disagree. A lot may say football, and I'm fine with that. I get it. But for me, it's always been about baseball. Uh, one of the bad things about COVID when it first hit was because I like going out to my local ballpark here. It's AAA ballpark, and I couldn't go to any baseball games last year. I couldn't go to any. I missed it. I noticed it. It was just so that was one of those noticeable things that I did greatly miss. We've changed that. Things have changed a little bit now. Things have opened up again. In fact, that local ballpark that I just mentioned, when it opened up this year, me and my dad went to the first home game, and it just felt good to be out there at the ballpark watching some baseball, uh, having a beer and hot dog, and just watching some baseball with the old man. It was just cool. It was just cool. But that's baseball. That a lot of great memories I have with baseball, and baseball movies hold a special place to me. And I've mentioned a few baseball movies in the past, but I don't think I've ever mentioned this particular baseball movie before. So I'm glad that this is going to finally get talked about, because I should have talked about it before now. And for you on YouTube, you're already seeing what it is. For those listening in, this baseball movie was directed by Barry Levinson. Its writers were Bernard Malamud, probably said the name horribly wrong. Roger Downey. It stars Robert Redford, Robert Duvall, Glenn Close, Kim Basinger, Barbara Hershey's in the movie, Wilford Brimley. It is, Joe Don Baker. Can't forget about Joe Don Baker. It is The Natural. Now, The Natural is up there as far as just, baseball movies, definitely. And it's definitely up there as far as sports movies. I keep saying this. I'm gonna have to do a sports movie list. I'm just gonna have to do it. But this stars Robert Redford, who plays Roy Hobbs, who's this middle-aged guy who's just loved baseball all his life, and he was on the uprise. He was going to be a star when an incident happened, and now he's trying to come back into the game. He just comes out of nowhere and becomes this legendary ball player. And he has, of course, his bat with the lightning bolt in it, and it's just a feel-good movie. And I'm not a huge Robert Redford fan. He was a little bit out of my era as far as a lot of his movies, but when I hear his name, this is immediately what I think of is this movie. It's such a great feel-good baseball movie. Uh, baseball baseball movies tend to be that. Not all like Major League. I mean, it's a feel-good movie too, but it's in a different way. But this was just an awesome, awesome movie, and the soundtrack and the music for this, it is ingrained in baseball. I mean, when you see baseball documentaries of any type, the, the music from The Natural is somewhere going to pop up. It has to, because this movie is so ingrained in baseball culture, and the music is so as soon as you hear it, you know it. And it's tied to baseball. It's just an immediate connection. And I couldn't get enough of this movie when I first watched it. It is just a beautiful, beautiful movie. Uh, could not recommend this more. It's definitely one of the best sports movies of all time. It is one of the best baseball movies of all time. Um, I just can't say enough about it. I hear the words "the natural." This is what I think of first, not the wrestler who called himself the natural. I think of this first. Like I said, it's just a great feel good movie. If you're a fan of baseball, if baseball happens to be your favorite sport, there are certain baseball movies you must watch, and this is one of them. It's just a great, stunning movie, great acting, tremendous music, and of course, Robert Redford as Roy Hobbs stole the show as he should. And you travel this journey with him. And as I've gotten older, there's some things I didn't understand back then that make a lot more sense to me now. Um, so this movie has aged very well. It is a classic, classic movie, classic sports movie, classic baseball movie, and one you need to experience for yourself. It is, and that's why for me, it's number 7, The Natural. Number 6. Number 6 has an interesting life cycle, this movie. This was just one silly little movie, and all of a sudden, this one silly little movie has spawned off sequels, cartoon shows, and recently a spinoff. And in between, managed to save some time to have a reboot. And it all started with one little movie. Who would have thought that this movie would have gotten as big as it got and spawned off a franchise and changed the careers of the people involved in this little project? Directed by John G. Advidson. Probably said that name wrong. You know I'm terrible with names. Written by Robert Mark Kamen, and it stars Ralph Macchio, Pat Morita, Elizabeth Shue, Martin Grove, William Zapka. That should tell you what it is. I mean, I said Ralph Macchio. I mean, come on. What else did Ralph Macchio do? I mean, he was in The Outsiders, but come on. We all know what this is. The Karate Kid. Karate Kid. I mean, we all know this plot. We've grown up on some level with this plot, and it's just basically this martial artist, Mr. Miyagi, played by Pat Morita, who teaches karate to this kid who's getting picked on, Ralph Macchio, Danielson. it, that's it. I mean, that's it. But the movie became so much more. It became so much more because a lot of us could relate to being bullied as a kid. And I remember there was a moment that I was tempted to study martial arts, but I wouldn't do it because there was no real Mr. Miyagi. I wanted Mr. Miyagi to teach me. And I was like, well, if you can't find Mr. Miyagi, is there a Splinter out there somewhere? But no, there's no Splinter out there either. So the Karate Kid just, like I said, this spawned off a franchise. I love the Karate Kid Part 2. It's actually a very good movie. Karate Kid Part 3, I think they were reaching there, and then it split, and they were going to start this brand new franchise, the next Karate Kid. That didn't work. In between, there was a cartoon show, which I did watch, which was just weird. Uh, and of course, it got rebooted with Jackie Chan and Will Smith's kid, Jaden. And we live now with Cobra Kai, which I'm probably the only person that can say this. And some of you are probably going to go, but I have not watched 1 minute of Cobra Kai. I just haven't watched it. I keep saying to myself to watch it, but somehow I just don't end up watching it. Eventually, I got to break down and watch this before somebody botches and says something that ruins it, and then I won't watch any of it. But Pat Morita obviously stole the movie. He completely stole this movie, and he he became the father figure that you loved, that uncle that you loved, that one teacher that always believed in you when nobody else did, and that stupid little wink of his and the smiling, and of course the crane kick became popular. I remember kids. I'll tell you a little story. There was a kid in school, and he was gonna get in a fight with this guy that was bullying him a little bit, and I watched like a lot of people did. I watched, and this guy tried to do the crane kick, and I looked at him. I'm like, "Oh, don't do that! Don't do that! Don't do that!" And he actually did do the kick. The problem was the guy wasn't there to get kicked in the face. He stepped to the side, and this guy kind of flew and in the air a little bit and went down. So he completely missed. He tripped and fell, and he started getting wailed on and beat up on until some adults came up and broke it up. But it was just hysterical that this guy actually tried to do the crane kick. I mean, he just stood there and did it. I'm like, oh, bro, don't do that. I mean, everybody just was smiling a little bit, and they're like, oh, he's really going to do that. And a couple people who hadn't seen the Karate Kid didn't know what the heck he was doing. But hey, whatever. If that guy's out there listening right now, bro, I don't know what you were thinking, but that was funny. That was funny. That guy could probably do that move now and like completely kick people's asses, but I don't know what he was thinking back then. But Karate Kid, like I said, just a great feel good movie. Pretty good soundtrack as well. But of course, it made a career for for Ralph Macchio. Uh, it's what he's known for. You think Ralph Macchio, you think the Karate Kid. I do remember him in The Outsiders, and he has done other projects. Of course, it's not like he just did the Karate Kid and nothing else, but that's what he's known for. He's known for the Karate Kid, and the fact that he's in Cobra Kai clearly means he doesn't mind it. He never struck. It didn't seem. I didn't hear stories saying that he hated being a part of the Karate Kid. So he's handled that well. A lot of the people seem to be proud that they were part of this movie, part of the franchise. And this franchise all started with one little martial art movie about a kid being bullied. But hey, you never know what's gonna click, and people are gonna grab a hold of and remember forever. And everybody remembers the Karate Kid, and that's why it's got its spot proudly with me, number 6, the Karate Kid. Oh boy, we're in the top 5. All right, number 5. This isn't a feel-good movie. This isn't a comedy. Well, some things that are a little funny in it, I guess, if you got that kind of a sense of humor. But no, this is horror. This is violence. This is your scary little monsters. And it just so happens he's my favorite scary little monster. Does that help you? Maybe not. For those watching, now you know what it is. This movie was directed by the legendary Wes Craven, who was also the writer. Stars Heather Langenkamp, Johnny Depp, Robert Englund, who just about a week or two ago celebrated his birthday. So happy belated birthday to him. John Saxon, Amanda Weiss, Charles Fleischer. It is A Nightmare on Elm Street. The Nightmare on Elm Street franchise is I've mentioned this franchise a few times. Again, this is one of those things that has popped up a few times on this show. Of the movie monsters, Freddy Krueger has always been my favorite. He's never scared me. I'm not scared of him, but even as a kid, I was never scared of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. I found them entertaining. I found Freddy captivating. I had a glove as a kid. I had a glove. I had a mask that came with a hat. Uh, I was totally enveloped in the Nightmare on Elm Street, and it was a franchise that started off great with this movie. The second one was yuck, and then the third one, the best of the franchise, was the third one, and then it was from there that it started to dip. Now, this franchise has had a live action TV show, video games. Unfortunately, it did have a reboot. It's had weird spin-offs with the Freddy vs. Jason, which I fucking hate. But it all started with this one movie, which it's about Freddy Krueger, this guy who is able to inhabit your dreams. And if you die in your dreams, you die in the real world. And this group of kids is keeps dreaming about him, and they all keep it a secret until they realize they're all having the same dreams. Heather Langenkamp's character is the one who's, trying to fight off Freddy. She's our hero for this movie. Now, you learn about the past of Freddy Krueger, and if you haven't watched the movie, I don't want to blow too much as far as the plot, so I won't say too much about the plot, but he was not the nicest of people, we'll just say. Freddy had some issues. He had some problems. He had things he liked. Some things he liked a little too much. And the townspeople didn't like that he had these likes. So they decided to kill him. And and this is him getting revenge on those who killed him by going after their children. So who would have thought this was going to spawn off a franchise, this kind of a movie? It spawned off music. The Fat Boys had a song. DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince had a song about this franchise, about this movie. So I have the box set. I have it on VHS and I have it on DVD. And I will eventually say the heck with it, and I will get it on Blu-ray because I just love the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise so much. I don't like Johnny Depp, but this is my favorite Johnny Depp movie, and you can get, if you've watched it, you know why. But and the whole thing got started with a simple newspaper article. Wes Craven said he was reading a newspaper about a young boy who was scared to death to sleep. He just refused to sleep, and his parents would discover this teen had a coffee pot in his closet, and he was taking all these pills and medicines to try to stay awake because he was so terrified to sleep. And one night the parents looked in, and he was asleep comfortably, wasn't thrashing, wasn't screaming, none of that. And the parents thought, oh, thank goodness the nightmare is over, because there were times he would wake up screaming his head off. And during the night, there's thrashing and bumping, and he's yelling and screaming. The parents run in, and the kid is dead. True story. True story. And that story in a newspaper that Wes Craven read inspired this franchise. And we're all in a better place because of this franchise. As far as movie making, we got to see some great movie making. Freddy Krueger, of course, a legend, and they found the right guy to do it. Unfortunately, they did that reboot, which I refuse to watch. I saw the trailer. looks horrific. I'm not touching it. So, and there's talks of another Nightmare on Elm Street movie. And Robert Englund said he'd do it. And I'm like, I think Rob's 72 now. I think that's what he turned, 72. But he's like, I would do it. I would come back and play Freddy. I'm like, I don't know if that would work, but I'd be willing to at least look at the trailer. But Nightmare on Elm Street, like I said, great franchise. All started with this one little movie. Had it not been for this, we wouldn't have had the great franchise that we now get to experience. Freddy Krueger, Nightmare on Elm Street, number 5. Number 4. Okay, we just had some horror. Let's try to dip back into some good-natured, maybe some comedy. Now, action comedy, but this was an action comedy, which also has a very weird story from its starts as to what it came from. What's that movie? Well, those of you on YouTube, you're already seeing what it is. Those of you listening in, well, for you, this movie was directed by Martin Beast. Its writers are Daniel Pierre Jr. and Danilo Bach. Stars Judge Reinhold, John Ashton, Eddie Murphy, uh, Stephen Burkoff, Jonathan Banks, Ronnie Cox, James Russo, Lisa Elbacher. I probably said her name horrifically wrong. Uh, Rest in peace to Gilbert R. Hill, who played Inspector Todd. That should already tell you what it is. It is Beverly Hills Cop. Now, Beverly Hills Cop was originally not a comedy. It was serious action movie, not a speck of comedy in it. And that movie got changed and became something else. But Beverly Hills Cop went to Eddie Murphy and they turned it into this comedy. Now, what was this movie originally? Because it did get made. Cobra, starring Sylvester Stallone. Beverly Hills Cop was originally going to star Sylvester Stallone. And that movie went off and became Cobra. And this movie became the Beverly Hills Cop that we know now. Now, I happen to like Cobra. I do. It's one of those little guilty pleasures. But when you put Beverly Hills Cop next to Cobra, obviously Beverly Hills Cop won big time. Eddie Murphy's career at, not to say he wasn't having a good career at this point, he was. But this movie shot him to the moon. And it is a great movie. It is, maybe it's one of his best. There's another actor who I might have to do a list of his best movies, Eddie Murphy. But of course, this would spawn off a franchise. There would be 3 movies. Supposedly a talk for a 4th movie, which also in between there was a talk of turning this into a TV show. Who knows what's going to happen? The latest I heard was this: they were going to do a movie, a 4th movie. But I also heard of reboots. Beverly Hills Cop, of course, stars Eddie Murphy playing Detective Axel Foley of the Detroit Police Department, and one of his friends comes to visit him in Detroit. And when they come back from just a night of hanging out at the bar, they get accosted in the hallway of Eddie's apartment. Eddie gets hit over the head, and these guys kill his friend. He tells his inspector, I just want to go on vacation for a couple of weeks. He goes out to Beverly Hills because he investigated, and his friend had came also from Beverly Hills out in that area, and he's going out there to find who killed his friend. And he's a wisecracking, rule-breaking, just kind of a cop. Definitely not a kind of cop that probably exists today, but you couldn't help but like Axel Foley. And of course, the theme music to it became too famous and became a meme, and that I don't even know what that video. If you already were around this time, you already know what I'm thinking. But he comes out to Beverly Hills to investigate this, and that's where he meets Sergeant Taggart and Detective Billy Rosewood, who are played by John Ashton and Judge Reinhold. And they're straight-laced cops. And Axel, they just somehow gel somehow to investigate what's going on. And it's a classic Eddie Murphy movie. He was such a genius back then. You Not to say that he's not making good movies now. I mean, it's just not as frequent as he was back then. He owned this era of movies. You could say he was one of those actors that it just seemed could not do wrong. Eventually, that era ends for everyone. I remember Will Smith had that kind of an era where it just seemed like he was doing no wrong. Then he did some wrongs, and he's on the climb back, and he's done some good movies. But this was during a time when Eddie just owned. Coming from Saturday Night Live, of course, he's been in a lot of great movies. 48 Hours, Boomerang. Uh, this is one of those movies really high up. Um, I have it on VHS. Uh, didn't have it on DVD, but I won this prize at my job, and it gave me this I think it was like $100 coupon or something like that at Best Buy when Best Buy was around, and I actually would be willing to buy anything in there. And I bought nothing but a bunch of Blu-rays, and one of them was Beverly Hills Cop. I bought the Blu-ray of it. Now, strangely, there wasn't a Blu-ray for Beverly Hills Cop 2, so I had to buy that one on DVD, and I did buy Beverly Hills Cop 3. um, yeah, Beverly Hills Cop 3 is absolute trash. Sorry, Eric, but it was trash. Uh, this franchise, again, it's amazing what movies can click, and this one just clicked. And for Eddie, he's obviously tried to recapture the magic of this when they did Beverly Hills Cop 3, and it did not work. It just didn't work. That movie was bad. Uh, but Beverly Hills Cop, just a hysterical movie. Also, like I said, it's got the action elements, and Eddie was able to pull off the action elements, I think, just fine. I mean, he wasn't doing martial arts or anything like that, but he did the action elements just fine. And Beverly Hills Cop 2, not as good as Beverly Hills Cop 1, but still an enjoyable movie. Uh, I would recommend both those movies, Beverly Hills Cop 1 and 2. They're both very good, one being better. And please, again, I'm sorry, Eric, please skip Beverly Hills Cop 3. You have no reason to watch it. And if they decide to do Beverly Hills Cop 4, would I watch it? Sadly, I probably would. I'd look at the trailer, but I probably would and just hope that it's not worse than Beverly Hills Cop 3. Because if it's worse than that, we're in trouble and Eddie needs to hang him up. But Beverly Hills Cop, an awesome movie. One of those, I mentioned there were some big movies coming up. Beverly Hills Cop was one of those big movies that occurred during this time frame, during the early 80s. And it made an absolute living legend star for the time in Eddie Murphy, who was richer than any of us could have ever imagined during this time. But that's my number 4, Beverly Hills Cop. Number 3. I think somebody's going to get a little upset with me that this is going to be number 3. And I'm talking to you, Rob. I hope you don't get upset, and I hope you understand why this is number 3. But it's not an insult that it's number 3. You just have to think of the 2 movies that are above it. And this is Me. This is a huge movie that spawned off a franchise again. Spawned off a whole lot of stuff. And simply put, it once again stars that familiar person. Some of you are already seeing his face, or seeing the movie, I should say, and maybe seeing what's under his face. This is an epic franchise. It's directed by James Cameron, written also by James Cameron, and Gail Ann Hurd and William Wisher. Stars once again Arnold Schwarzenegger, Linda Hamilton, Michael Biehn, Lance Hendrickson, Paul Winfield, Rick Rossovich. I tried to remember his name, and Dick Miller again popped up from Gremlins. This is, of course, The Terminator. We all know this plot of The Terminator. This franchise is still ongoing. Just a few years ago, had another movie done, and supposedly they're doing another one. Of course, the plot is simple. We all know what it is. It stars Linda Hamilton as this woman who's going to change the course of human history. At first, we don't quite understand why, because they didn't reveal it to us quite yet. But this Terminator machine is sent back in time to kill her. And the Resistance sends a human, played by Michael Biehn, Kyle Reese, to protect her. And there's your plot. And it's Reese and Sarah Connor, played by Linda Hamilton, trying to escape this Terminator, played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, who he was a hero in so many things. So there were people who were concerned that this was going to ruin his career playing a villain. They were concerned that this was going to ruin his career. Well, obviously, I don't think it ruined his career any. And there's so many funny stories about the Terminator. Lance Hendrickson, who's an actor I love, stars in one of my favorite TV shows, Millennium. He originally was thought of to play the Terminator. And there's a famous moments of him in the audition room, just sitting in the room, dressed and acting like the Terminator. And everybody in the room was scared to death of him. And they were just about to call the cops until, he's like, hey, it's just me. And he didn't get the role, obviously, but he was so damn convincing and so terrifying that they put him in the movie, and he got to play one of the cops. And of course, one of the more popular stories, it's weird to hear it, O.J. Simpson was actually thought of to play the Terminator, but they decided not to do it because, and I quote, we don't believe anybody would think O.J. is capable of killing people. Yikes. That's all I'm saying. Anyway, this movie is spawned off a huge franchise, and it's one of those rare instances where a sequel can be better than the original, because Terminator 2 Judgment Day would come out after this and just took over. Terminator is a great movie. T2 is legendary. To me, it's better than Terminator. If you've listened to a previous episode where me and Rob were counting down our Arnold movies, I already talked about how I feel about Terminator 2. But Terminator 1, just great action. For the time, very good effects. Some of them don't quite hold up today, but you can let that stuff go. But this is another one of those instances where a movie can help build a career, and it built a few careers. Arnold Schwarzenegger's career really shot up. James Cameron's career really shot up. Just careers were built on this, and it is an absolutely legendary movie. Unfortunately, the problem with the movies is they peaked at Terminator 2. Terminator 3 was eek. And the Christian Bale one is where I stopped. I was done right there. Genesis looks stupid, and the dark one that just recently came out, I heard, was absolutely god awful. So, and I hated the TV show. So to me, Terminator has not really had anything since Terminator 2. And that was in 1991, I believe. So It's a great franchise, but for me, it peaked right there and has not done anything right since Terminator 2. So, would I watch another Terminator movie because they're supposedly going to do another one? Well, I haven't watched the last, what, two or three. I haven't watched them. I have no interest in watching them. So, unless something in the trailer really grabs my attention, I'm not going to watch it. I own the two Terminator movies that I want to. I actually do have Terminator 3, but I never watch it. But Terminator, just an awesome movie. Linda Hamilton back then. I think her twin sister recently passed away. Well, maybe not recently, but within the last year she passed away. I remember hearing that news. So rest in peace to her sister, who was NT2 because they're twin sisters. Uh, just an amazing movie. Terminator, the special effects, of course, the theme, the music, the just everything about this movie is so awesome. And of course, the line, "I'll be back." Everybody makes fun of that line now, but it is the line. It's what he's known for. It's one of those things, jokingly, you can say it's probably going to be on his tombstone. "I'll be back." Or maybe even a joke, "I won't be back," or just something hinting to it. But Arnold Schwarzenegger, again, the name keeps popping up. I'm sure you love that, Rob. His name just pops up more than anybody else, probably on the countdown. I've said Arnold Schwarzenegger's name more, but it's fitting. And he's number three. Sorry, Rob, three. There are two movies bigger from 1984, but its place is secure with me. Terminator, number three. Number two. Okay. Uh, Again, there's just certain things I'm known for. If you know me, certain things I love. And if you know about the movies that came out during the year 1984, pretty sure you knew this movie was going to pop up somewhere. You just probably didn't know where. And some of you may completely disagree with me putting it this high up. I know some of you will say, "You put this over Terminator? Really?" Yeah, I sure as hell do. But it stars it or it's about one of my favorite things. It's a genre that I love. It's science fiction, and it's to me the best of science fiction. Its absolute best, where it peaked. For those of you on YouTube, you're already seeing it. For those of you listening in, you can't quite see it yet, but I will just tell you it is directed by Leonard Nimoy. That should say it right there. Leonard Nimoy. You know that name. You know what he's done. It's written, of course, by Gene Roddenberry, Harv Bennett. Two names. Again, you should already know what this is. Stars William Shatner, DeForest Kelly, James Doohan, George Takei, Nicole Nichols, Walter Koenig, Robin Curtis, Phil Morris, oh gosh, what's his name? Merritt Bertrick, Christopher Lloyd. It is Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock. Y'all, I'm a Trekker. I love Star Trek. I am passionate about my love of Star Trek. And Star Trek, it started with my mother. She's not even that big a sci-fi fan, but for some odd reason, she had Star Trek: The Motion Picture and Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. She had these movies, and I watched one day. I have the VHS still. It's a special edition version. It's over 3 hours long, but I watched Star Trek: The Motion Picture, and I read the back, and it talked about it being a TV show. I'm like, after I watched the movie, I'm like, this was a TV show, and so there's no internet back then. I remember looking in the TV guide, and it said Star Trek, and it was going to be on local Fox station. So I watched it, and I was hooked. And that was all it took. I got hooked to Star Trek, and I was dead set on Star Trek. Some of you may think I'm crazy for what I'm about to say, but I'm sorry, it's the truth. To me, Star Trek is better than Star Wars. I'm sorry. I know for some of you that's blasphemy. I love Star Wars. I can comfortably watch them both. I love Star Wars. If you forced me to have to watch only one and I have to never watch the other, which that would be stupid, but if that had to occur, I would choose Star Trek to stay and Star Wars to go. Thankfully, that'll never happen. I can enjoy both. But I happen to love Star Trek more because to me, it's more realistic than Star Wars. There's just more realism in Star Trek than there is in Star Wars. And that's before J.J. Abrams decided to butt fuck it. I hate J.J. Abrams. But Star Trek 3, of course, takes up pretty much right after Star Trek 2, The Wrath of Khan, in which Spock sacrificed himself to save the crew of the Enterprise. And they're headed back and to a space dock, and eventually the ship's going to be decommissioned. If you're looking at this on YouTube, you can see the Enterprise. It took a beating in Star Trek. All that is from Star Trek 2. It took a pounding. And they're supposed to be just decommissioned, almost basically somewhat retired. And Spock's father, Sarek, shows up and says, you know, Spock's not dead. His Katra. He gave someone his Katra. And eventually Kirk discovers that it was McCoy, and he's got to reunite Spock's Katra with Spock. And that's why it's called The Search for Spock. But also, Leonard Nimoy had decided to stop doing Star Trek, which is why they killed the character Spock in The Wrath of Khan. Both sides realized that was a mistake. The fan base hated that they did it. Eventually, Leonard Nimoy learned, yeah, that probably wasn't smart. And the only way to get him back and to write the character in again was for him to go into the director's chair. And that ended up being a very good idea. Some of the better Star Trek movies were directed by Leonard Nimoy. And like I said, it's the crew of the Enterprise. It's my favorite crew, the best. Kirk, Spock, McCoy, Scotty, Sulu, Chekhov, Uhura. I just love this, and this was a good era of Star Trek, not the shitty era of Star Trek that we inhabit now. And again, I say you, J.J. Abrams, you son of a bitch. I hated what you did with Star Trek in the movies. The TV shows, Discovery fucking sucks. And I'm scared to watch Picard. I haven't watched one episode of Picard because I'm so scared to death to watch it. I think I would like Picard, but I'm scared to watch it because of the shitty things that have happened lately to Star Trek. And I don't want to get on my soapbox. I could talk about that forever. Like I said, Search for Spock. I am a hardened Star Trek fan. I've been to Star Trek conventions numerous times. I have the Eagle Moss Star Trek Starships collection. Yes, I've gone that far. I have audiobooks, VHSs, DVDs, Blu-rays, books, you just all kinds of Star Trek stuff. I once had a Star Trek uniform, just all manner of Star Trek stuff, plaques, Christmas ornaments, you name it. I have a shelf that is dedicated to Star Trek. That's all that's on it is Star Trek. Star Trek movies, Star Trek TV shows. There's a plaque on there. There's a model of the Enterprise on there that actually, if you push a button, lights up and you hear the Star Trek theme. I just love Star. I even remember doing a 1-800 phone number where you do the Kobayashi Maru, and I successfully did it, and I was promoted to the rank of captain, and they actually send you a little certificate of that. I still have it, by the way. I still have it, by the way. Um, I was promoted. It says my name, Captain Mike Booker Jr. It's awesome. But like I said, Star Trek, awesome. You can hear it in my voice. I just love Star Trek. I love Star Trek. So Rob, I hope you understand. You know me. Come on, you knew, knowing it's Star Trek, you knew this would, for me, top Terminator. I'm sorry. You know I love Terminator, but this is Star Trek. To me, Star Trek is better than Terminator. Number three, or sorry, number two, the runner-up, Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock. We are at number one, numero uno, the best of 1984. But before we do that, let's do just a quick little review. Number 10 was Gremlins. Number 9 was Revenge of the Nerds. Number 8 was Conan the Destroyer. Number 7 was The Natural, starring Robert Redford. Number 6 was The Karate Kid, the original, of course, with Ralph Macchio and Pat Morita. Number 5, Nightmare on Elm Street. Number 4, Beverly Hills Cop. Number 3, Terminator. Runner-up, number 2, Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock. Numero uno. We're at number 1. What was the number 1 movie to me from 1984? If you know what movies came out in 1984, you had to know this movie was going to pop up. And you've probably been waiting for it. So without further ado, for those of you on YouTube, that movie is simple. For those of you listening in, you can't quite see what the folks on YouTube are looking at. If you do, please go over to the YouTube channel. I have a YouTube page. Just search The Countdown with MJ Book, and you can watch these videos that I put out unedited. Unlike the audios, I do edit that. The videos don't get edited. I just post them. I just edit in an intro. But this movie defines the 80s. It's one of those movies that defines the whole decade, not just the year, the decade. It is one of the biggest franchises ever. It is something I've mentioned numerous times. It has had a cartoon show. It has had sequels. It had a spinoff. It's going to have another movie coming up soon. And it is directed by Ivan Reitman, stars Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, Harold Ramis, Rick Moranis, Sigourney Weaver, Ghostbusters. Come on. Now, Rob, I know you're not going to like the fact that Ghostbusters is number 1, and you're not going to like that this toppled Terminator. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, but come on. It is Ghostbusters head and shoulders. I didn't even have to think about it. Writing out this list, when I was putting it together, the first movie I thought of that year, I wrote down Ghostbusters. And I knew it would be number 1. Unless something popped up that I completely forgot, I knew this would be number 1. The second movie I wrote down was Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock. I knew it came out that year. I knew it did. I also knew Terminator came out. I marked that 3rd. So the first 3 movies I already knew in the order. I had already unknowingly written them down properly. Pretty sure I knew Ghostbusters would be number 1. Pretty sure I knew Star Trek would be number 2, and I was pretty sure Terminator would be number 3. But you never know what other movies you might discover. But Ghostbusters starts out with these 3 parapsychologist professors who are a bit eccentric, a bit off, and they decide to open up a little business, this ghost removal service. They decided to become Ghostbusters. Now, the plot, is it worth going down the plot of this? Probably not. But that's the plot. They're Ghostbusters. They hunt and capture ghosts. And it wouldn't be entertaining if it wasn't for the cast. And what a top-notch cast they managed to put together. The original Ghostbusters were just three. It was just Bill Murray, Harold Ramis, and Dan Aykroyd. And about a quarter, maybe half of the way in, Ernie Hudson's character, Winston Zedmore, shows up and applies, and he becomes the fourth Ghostbuster. Um, of course, this has Sigourney Weaver in it back in the day. She's still beautiful. She's still beautiful today. But just deals with Gozer, the Gozer. I'm not going to go through all that stuff. It would make no sense. It's totally off the wall. But it's so funny. It's so entertaining. Dan Aykroyd in this, you just believe everything he's saying. He spouts off such nonsense, but it seems to make sense by the way he plays Dr. Raymond Stantz. Ray, and that's just the way Dan Aykroyd is. If you listen to him talk about these movies, he's such a believer in all the science, the nonsense that he created. Because he and Harold Ramis, of course, were a part of the writing team for this. So it was he and Dan Aykroyd and Harold Ramis wrote this. And believe it or not, uncredited, Rick Moranis actually played a little hand in the writing. Some people don't know that. But this movie was epic. I remember I had a proton pack. I had it just like a lot of kids did. I had a trap. And then when it became a cartoon show, the real Ghostbusters, I had all the toys. I had Ecto-1, which I already had from the movie and then the sequel, but now I had it again for the animated show, and I had the Firehouse, and I had all the figures for that. I owned the first two movies, of course, on DVD. I have the animated series, the box set, so I have that on DVD as well. Ghostbusters is huge, and of course, you can't talk about Ghostbusters without the theme song by Ray Parker Jr. That song was a gigantic hit. It had stars all over the place saying, "Who you gonna call? Ghostbusters." That became popular, just saying, "Who you gonna call?" You still hear people say that, "Who you gonna call?" And of course, the logo. The logo, all you have to do is just see that, and you know exactly what it is. Now, unfortunately, it did part of this franchise, there's some negative. Now, Ghostbusters 2, I enjoy it. Is it better than Ghostbusters 1? No, it definitely is not. But for me, it's enjoyable. I can watch Ghostbusters 2. And then there was the more recent remake where things went nutty and suddenly you were sexist for not liking it. When the fact that they're women has nothing to do with it. It was just a bad movie. That's it. It was just a bad movie. Whether it was starring women or starring men, it was just a bad movie. Now we have Ghostbusters Afterlife. I'm still nervous about that after the major fuck up that they already did, which I've never seen that movie because I saw the trailer and I knew that is bad. So I'm nervous about the new one, but I'm gonna watch it and hope to heck, based off the trailer, I'm gonna give it a try. At least it looks somewhat good. So I'm willing to give it a chance. But to me, Ghostbusters is just epic. Ghostbusters 2 was the movie we watched for my birthday party. Um, it Nothing can topple Ghostbusters. It was easily the movie of this year, and it is one of the top movies of the 80s. If I was to do what is the best movies of the 80s, which maybe that's how I should end it, with just a countdown of the best movies, which I don't know if there's really a reason for me to do it, but if you want to see me do it, let me know. But Ghostbusters to me, head and shoulders, one of the it would be one of those at the tippy top, hands down. And I know there's some people who don't like Ghostbusters, who don't understand why it's a big deal, but this movie was huge. It was just huge, and not everybody's going to be a fan of it, but they found the right cast. I love playing the Ghostbusters video game. that came out on PlayStation 4, which honestly, that's more of the third movie. That because it stars the original Ghostbusters voicing their characters again. It even has Annie Potts in it, who back in the day I had a little crush on back in the day. She played Janine. Uh, but it's Ghostbusters just epic, just an epic franchise. And this movie got huge, and nobody saw that coming. This was just kind of a silly little spoof, and it got huge. One of the biggest movies. That cannot be denied. Even if you don't like it, you can't deny how big this movie got. It earns its spot, to me, the number one movie from 1984. There we go. That's it. That's your countdown. So what'd you think? What are your movies? What movies do you think I forgot? Because I'm sure you think there's some movies I forgot. Like, I don't know. Let's see what other movies came out this year. 2010, the year We Make Contact, came out that same year. Starman, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, Johnny Dangerously, Police Academy, 16 Candles, The Woman in Red, Red Dawn, Muppets Take Manhattan, The Last Starfighter, The Toxic Avenger came out that year. That's just to name a few. I mean, there was a few movies that came out that year. But what do you think? What movies are your top 10? What do you think of my top 10? Was there something I forgot? Was there something you'd put in? Please let me know. There are plenty of ways you can let me know. Plus, there are plenty of ways to listen to this show or watch it. You can send me an email. Just send it to the countdown2020@gmail.com. Just send me those emails if you have any show suggestions. If you want to share with me your own list. Heck, if you want to do a countdown with me, let me know there. Facebook, you can go on the Facebook page. You can do everything I just said. Plus, you can listen to the show on there as well. Just search at the Countdown 2020 Podcast 1. You can also go on to Twitter. Twitter, you can also listen to the show, do all the things I just said. Just search at the Countdown PO1. You can listen to the show over on Spotify. Just search the Countdown 2020. I'm also on Instagram. Just search the Countdown 20. You can also go on to Amazon Audible. You can listen to me over there. Just search the Countdown Podcast. And of course, all are available through podbean.com. Just search the Countdown Podcast. And of course, got the YouTube page. For those of you watching, you already know I have a YouTube page. For those of you listening, yeah, I have a YouTube page where you can listen to the same audio, or you can watch the unedited, as far as content. I just edited an intro, but you can watch the unedited video of me sitting here staring at a camera, looking at y'all and telling you my countdown. Just search on the YouTube channel, The Countdown Podcast with MJ Book. Please subscribe. Please comment on there. Let me know what you think. I do want to thank Kevin MacLeod for the royalty-free music, Incomtech.com, Ice Flow that you hear at the beginning and the end of the episodes. And always want to give a plug out to Third Generation Wrestling. If you're a professional wrestling fan, please listen to Third Generation Wrestling, hosted by The Real Big E and the Ambassador Rob. I'm a contributor onto the show, talk about professional wrestling. Like I said, we just did a recent episode reviewing the most recent NXT pay-per-view. We're going to be having a Hell in the Cell coming up this coming weekend. Depending on when this gets aired this weekend, as far as my time right now, this coming weekend, we got Hell in the Cell. We've done stuff with AEW, plus the show's also done movie reviews such as Mortal Kombat. Of course, you remember we did an interpromotional episode where we talked about the most recent Mortal Kombat, discussed all kinds of things on there. Other movies like Ready to Rumble, The Wrestler, No Holds Barred. So please, they're available through all the channels I just mentioned, plus a few others. Please follow the guys at Third Generation Wrestling. I would appreciate it greatly. Tell them MJ Book sent you. And that's all I got. So I will catch you all again on the next episode of The Countdown. Talk to y'all again later. Have yourself a great day or evening, whatever time it is. Bye-bye.